Hello, Baker here, and today I have another character analysis for you. This time we will be discussing Krile's character. Now, Krile is a character who is... Wait, what is that? Who the fuck are you? Wait, is she trying to steal her screen time? Huh? Wait, I know you, I know what that thing is. Be careful, Krile. If you let her, she's going to steal all your screen time. She's going to sideline you for the whole story. Krile, get her now, do you hear me?
Imacuttlefish, I presume. It's true what they say. You do have the eyes of a monster. A ravenous, insatiable fiend. Try this!
Hello, Baker here, and welcome to my first Dawntrail video. Now, as someone who's always been a huge fan of Krile, it was pretty much a no-brainer to release a video about her first. You can consider this a preliminary analysis of sorts, because it's quite clear her story is not finished yet. That said, I had both friends and commenters express interest in hearing my thoughts on Dawntrail Krile, so to not leave you guys hanging, I'm dropping this video here and now. To start off, let's discuss the decision to feature Krile more prominently in the first place. We've known for a while that Krile was going to be a more prominent player in the Dawntrail story. Indeed, Krile playing a more active role and the possibility of an outfit change was teased as far back as September 2022 in an episode of a radio show called From Eorzea with Love. On top of that, we had the trailer featuring her, as well as the final patch MSQ of Endwalker indicating that there was a more relevant role in the horizon for her. If we look at this decision from a narrative point of view, I think it's actually quite logically sound. In Shadowbringers and Endwalker, we spent most of our time with this core group of 7 Scions: Tancred, Graha, Urianger, Alphino, Y'shtola, Estinian, and Analysing. We did meet other characters along the way, such as Reen or Venar, but the main focus was on these 7 individuals. That was basically our party, our cast of core characters as we went on those 2 journeys. With Endwalker having ended the Heidelin/Zodiac saga, one thing I think a lot of people were eager to see going forward was an entirely new cast of characters. The old saga was done with the Scions, so now they get to take a back seat and we can have a breath of fresh air. Dawntrail pretty much afforded them that opportunity. They then chose 3 characters as the focus. One completely new character created for Dawntrail, one introduced in Endwalker who was pretty much just a side character, and one who had been there since almost the beginning but never got a starring role in the MSQ. Then on top of this, we of course had the Scions as well, but they were there mainly just to fill in for trusts and to do cool stuff on occasion. I'm putting it a little blunt here, but that was basically the extent of their involvement.
Alphino, Analysing! What are you two doing here?
Good question.
I think this was a smart setup. Focusing on only 3 characters is a good call, and Krile being one of those characters makes a lot of sense, I would say. She's someone who doesn't necessarily hold a fan favorite status, but she has been around for a while and is a character the players are very familiar with, so she would basically act as this kind of a glue keeping this new group together in case people fail to warm up to the completely new character, Wuk-Lamat, or the very fresh side character, Erenville. There are also other merits to having Krile be one of the core. One is very obvious. Her Japanese voice actress Yoshino Nanjo is rather popular in Japan, probably most known as Eli Ayase from Love Live. Basically, it's like how we had Game of Thrones actors play Gaius and Ardbert in Shadowbringers. Giving such a distinguished actor a more prominent role made sense. That's not to detract from her English counterpart though, which I'll get into later. Another thing I could mention is that Krile is a very unique character, between her possessing the Echo, one with its own unique properties, among other things. Things that I'll also get into later on in the video. I suppose as an extra point, The three characters we focused on in Dawntrail were a breath of fresh air in a very superficial sense as well. We were traveling with a Rodga, a Bira, and a Lalafell. After so many years of mainly elves and cats, it was definitely a refreshing change. There's probably a tiny amount of people, no pun intended, who don't like Lalafells in the story, but to me it was nice to see one in the lead role like that. All in all, featuring Krile in a prominent role made perfect sense from a narrative point of view. Of course, in addition, I was excited seeing as I've always been a huge fan of her character, so getting to see more of her and her being an actual focus, I mean, what's not to love? Well, therein lies the issue, right? Did she actually get to be the star of the show? Did she get meaningful enough development? That's perhaps the main topic of the video, so let's start covering some points one by one. For Krile, I would say there were 3 points of interest in the Dawntrail story. I'll focus on each of these one by one and give my thoughts on them along the way. So, perhaps the most significant change to Krile's character in Dawntrail was her picking up the brush and becoming a Pictomancer. It's strange that I don't see this talked about, when that by itself is a huge bit of character development for her. Krile has a very satisfying story of showing up to Eorzea, being genuinely horrified by what she's seeing, and being afraid of all the terrors the Eorzeans have to deal with. She admires the Eorzean spirit and that of the Warrior of Light, which aspires her to slowly accumulate courage of her own, as seen when she's, for example, taking the role of a combat medic in Stormblood. Yet, she goes through many horrible ordeals throughout the Hydaelyn/Zodiac saga, and she never finds the courage to fight in the front lines. That is, until the final straw. In Aetia's scope, she wanted to contribute by providing guidance to the Scions as they advanced further into the livestream, but then she lost connection with them partway into the dungeon. She could no longer aid them in any capacity. All she could do was pray and sit helplessly, hoping they would return safe. This basically gnawed at her more and more, and she could no longer take it. She basically went, "Enough. I am so sick and tired of losing everyone around me, unable to do anything about it. I don't want to go back to being alone. As hard as it's going to be, I will do something about it. I want to fight alongside them because I am fed up with all the loss and solitude." And I think that right there is a very powerful piece of character development. Her picking up Pictomancer and accompanying you to the front lines is, in itself, proof of her conviction, and solidifies the fact that she has found new friends to rely on and doesn't need to be alone anymore, and that she'll do anything to protect those friends as they have protected her. It's a simple story, but to me it matters because this is integral to what Krile's character has always been about. In an interview with Famitsu, Naoki Yoshida talks about how something like this had been planned for Krile for a while. He felt it was a natural evolution of her character, having this desire to accompany the Scions and the Warrior of Light to the front lines. But he couldn't quite pull the trigger in Endwalker because she had that whole thing with Benar going on, and it may have been technical to execute. Oh well, better late than never, I suppose. And I must admit, playing the long game actually paid off somewhat. I think it does actually slot in the Krile story quite nicely. It allows her anguish to fester for a bit and makes her eventual change to Pictomancer all the more satisfying from a growth perspective. I also felt this growth was executed really well. It's quite subtle, but if you pay attention to Trust's dialogue, she might be a bit exhausted or relieved after a fight is over, or she might question her abilities briefly before a mechanic, but by the end, she has grown a lot of confidence in her abilities and has overcome a lot of her doubts. Some might say they wanted to see this demonstrated in a more apparent way, but I strongly disagree. I think having it demonstrated organically through gameplay is way better than having some dramatic scene where she spells this out to the player. Another admittedly subtle thing was that there were a few instances where you were climbing up or down something and Krile would be the first person you spoke to, where she would often say something like, "I think I'll rest up a bit," and then catch up later. I like that they drew attention to this because something that often separates a civilian from a fighter is stamina. In combat, there's a lot of moving around, and both in practicing it and fighting for real, people who are accustomed to it grow a lot of stamina and are able to perform much better physically and endure for longer. The fact that Krile is kind of a fledgling fighter and has to take these little pauses, I actually like that. I also like that she still continues her healing duties despite becoming a Pictomancer, such as after Tritalk's release or trying to heal Guro Jaja with Alphino. And speaking of Tritalk, I like that it's her first major hurdle to overcome and the kind of relief and confidence she gains from overcoming it. She even has this fun little remark after the fight. All this stuff is great, though I will point out one unfortunate misfire, which was not having a solo instance where you get to play as Krile. I think that could have been another avenue to explore her growth in this regard, and quite organically too, but I'll get more into that later. Now talking about her Pictomancer design overall, I'm a big fan of it. I've heard some people say that when they were introduced to Krile in Heavensward, they struggled to take her seriously because of the outfit, as she basically appears as a mascot. I was happy to see that they did not completely remove that element with this redesign. She still retains the hood, as it has become an iconic part of her character, but the rest of her outfit is redesigned and looks a lot better in my opinion, and it obviously also is way more fitting for combat. Overall, I think her design was really well done. I mean, there could have been many options to explore out of the Disciples of Magic options, but I think Pictomancer makes sense, as all the other options have more or less been already fulfilled by other characters. Plus, having her play the new job actually added to the character for me personally, though I am also aware that some people were debated by the earrings and thought she might be a green mage. Oh well, I think it also helped that I didn't unlock Pictomancer whatsoever, so her art seemed completely foreign to my character. Regardless, my warrior flight was always induced watching her fight. The power of painting. Yeah, Krile fucked them up. Fucked them up with the power of painting. It definitely fits the image I have of the warrior flight. They basically watch Krile fight, have no idea what she's doing, but hey, you know, it looks cool and she's wreaking havoc, so she gets a definite thumbs up. Also, this is a bit of a headcanon, but I'm glad I did Dawntrail on Dancer. I took Krile with me to every dungeon/trial and dance partnered her. Oh, I instantly swapped it. Oh, you can't do that? So many choices. Guess who I'm gonna dance partner? Let's go with Krile. I like to view this as a way of my warrior flight acting as kind of a big brother to Krile, easing her into becoming a fighter by supporting her through his dance steps that help her fling even more powerful spells. For those who don't know, the whole theme of Dancer is that you aid your allies through dancing, and the core mechanic is the dance partner mechanic, where you massively buff a single person of your choosing. Their job is essentially designed so that it's weaker than other DPS jobs, but makes up for it by massively buffing a single person, so it was perfect for this scenario. Can you imagine the confidence boost Krile got when her spells were massively enhanced by the warrior flight themselves? I like to imagine a kind of a physical manifestation of this being something like the smooth dancing basically guiding her strokes and allows them to land exactly the way she wants them to. Such a great role-playing moment, even if it was very specific to my situation. I also think the powers of a dancer and a Pictomancer make for such a winning combination. Wook Lamat may be able to win thanks to the power of peace and happiness, but over here, we fight back with the power of dance and drawing. Then the cherry on top is when at the end of her bit in the final zone, she shows gratitude towards the warrior flight for sticking with her to the end and reflects on her fears about what she might discover, but in the end being glad that she mustered up the courage to take up Pictomancy, which led to her discovering the truth about her parents. I had such a strong reaction to this comment because I really was there, supporting her 100% along the way, and it was such a nice way to round off that whole part of her character arc. All in all, I'd definitely say Krile becoming Pictomancer was such a great play. It's probably my second favorite job change in all of FF14. I don't know if anything can ever top Tancred becoming a gunbreaker, but Krile becoming a Pictomancer is right behind it.
A commission to investigate the Golden City in Tural.
Alright, so the other major thing we see right off the rip in Dawntrail is Krile's personal stake in this story. She finds an envelope addressed to her grandfather, which implores him to investigate the fabled City of Gold, and also comes with these earrings. The way this plays out in the story is that usually at the end of each feat that we complete, there is some sort of information she learns about the Golden City, where it's kinda drip-fed to us, slowly culminating in these major reveals regarding her personal connection to it all, and eventually entering the Golden City ourselves. I don't have an issue with how they did this. It sort of reminded me of the structure of Shadowbringers, where after restoring the darkness to each zone, we would learn some important lore details, usually from Emet-Selch himself. It acts as a kind of a reward in itself for continuing through the story, finding more lore and slowly piecing together this picture of what exactly the Golden City is and how it relates to Galuf, and more importantly, to Krile. Indeed, I found myself more invested in this part of the story than the whole Rite of Succession angle, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. Although the setup was good, the issue for me is more with the resolution of this whole mystery. I felt they did not stick the landing that well.
Following the changing of Dawn servants, Gulul Jar Jar spoke about the Golden City to his two successors. Thanks to Wuglamat, I was allowed to attend that meeting. Hoping to learn the truth of my grandfather's mission, what he did and saw, I volunteered to help in the Rite of Succession. At the end of which, I was able to hear the tale from Gulul Jar Jar.
If this is true, then it means that you hail from another reflection.
So it would seem.
The first mistake I felt was having Krile learn about her backstory, about basically coming from another reflection and all that, completely off screen. It does baffle me a bit why they chose to do it this way. We absolutely should have been able to witness her reaction to all of those revelations. It's like, imagine a different version of The Empire Strikes Back, where Luke is fighting Darth Vader in Cloud City, some limbs go flying and all that good stuff happens, but before the reveal it fades to black. Then later on, we're simply told, oh yeah, Darth Vader was his father, but we never see Luke's reaction. How lame would that be, right? Well, that's more or less what happened here with Krile. Yes, we were shown what happens in an Echo flashback, but I think they could have easily had their cake and eaten it too. Simply show her reaction to this information in addition to having the Echo flashback. That's it. But I guess they were worried we would be overwhelmed with that amount of screen time for Krile. I mean, God forbid, right? Yeah. And then the more egregious part, when the time finally comes to open the gate to the Golden City. Pretty much half the entire reason we went on this journey, and the entire culmination of Krile's story, where she finally gets to use the earrings her parents gave her to open the gate, and it's not even her. Yep, this random kid who we met like an hour ago is the one who gets to do the honors.
This doesn't make sense. How is it even possible?
Again, I am just completely dumbstruck as to how someone saw this as a good idea. If I had to guess, the reason they did it like this was to patch up a potential plot hole in that if all it takes is Krile's earring, then they could have opened the gate upon their first visit at the end of the level 95 dungeon. Hence why you need the king's authority, and hence why they couldn't have done that on the first visit, even by accident. But to me, that's like a complete non-issue. At that point in time, our characters don't know the connection between the earrings and the gate, and therefore have no reason to have Krile take off the earrings and dangle it in front of the terminal or whatever. Moreover, there are other ways to get around this issue that wouldn't involve completely removing her moment of glory. Maybe we find out there's a specific incantation that activates the data within the earrings to open the gate. I mean, anything. But the way they went about it was just... I honestly felt they were just taking the piss at that point. Like someone on the writing team had some personal vendetta against Krile and went to any length to ensure she can't be the star of the show for even the briefest moments. I get that to a lot of people it may not be a big deal. I mean, who cares? It's just opening the gate, whatever. But to someone who was very invested in both her character and this particular story arc, having someone else with absolutely no connection to any of this do the honors at the final moment, to me felt like a slap in the face.
Why isn't this working? Is there something missing? Must more blood be shed?
Try this!
In summary, her personal quest to find the Golden City, I didn't mind the slow burn nature of it, as we are drip-fed information throughout the story and slowly start figuring out what's going on and how it ties to Krile's backstory. But between her backstory being revealed to her off-screen and the bizarre choice to have Gulja do the honors of opening the gate, the resolution was simply not that satisfying, unfortunately.
Something else in here.
大帅好，中国！现在我有冰淇淋，我很喜欢冰淇淋，但是速度与激情就比冰淇淋。
Let's instead talk about what was satisfying, Krile encountering her biological parents in living memory. This was easily my favorite moment in the MSQ, and I fully admit I was brought to tears multiple times. They definitely played a bit of a long game. I mean, heck, this thing happened during the level 100 quests, but I do think it pays off quite nicely. Oh wow.
She's not lying.
She finally found. Oh wow.
How you've grown, my darling daughter.
Oh wow. That is awesome. I didn't expect to actually get misty-eyed there, but it's just wow, the delivery, you know, like the way she was just completely uncomposed, you know, like she just struggled to form the words, and then just the pure joy of, oh man. Wow. That was, I didn't expect to be like, obviously there were a lot of hints that, or like she hinted at it earlier, that you might meet the parents here, and that made sense, but I just didn't expect that, you know, to be such a what a wholesome scene that was. I think that was actually the first time the Dawntrail MSQ did legit brought me to tears, so that is well played, I guess. Yeah, well played by the writers and the voice actor. Definitely, I would say they delivered on it quite well. Oh man. It's pretty much the whole expansion has been kind of leading up to this point, you know, like constant, well not constantly, but it's been in the background, you know, like Krile's origins and well, you know, even the whole thing began with basically like, why did Galuf send this thing and the Golden City, you know, and it's basically been in the background the whole MSQ, and They really played the long game here. Because this is, I mean, this is literally level 100. Because even my voice is starting to turn. Sorry, I'm a bit, a bit emotional, I think. This is a level 100 quest. So they definitely played very much the long game, but wow, it paid off. I do think so. I think the reason this scene was so emotional is because Krile, more than most characters, has experienced so much loss over the course of this story. First, she lost her grandfather, the person that mattered to her the most, alongside everyone else when the Isle of Val vanished. Then she came to Eosia, a land that frightens her, only to lose one of her few remaining friends, Minfilia. Then she is kidnapped and goes through God knows what, and is experimented on for the Resonant and has her power used by a madman. Then she is able to return to the Isle of Val, only to see it turn into a place crawling with monsters, is re-traumatized through her survivor's guilt, and almost loses another of her friends. She then has to tend to the Scion's lifeless corpses for God knows how long, is then possessed by Heidelin on multiple occasions, while having to march halfway across Garlemald in a possessed state. Then she has to simply stand back and watch, unable to do anything as her friends confront the worst, making her feel even more impotent. Yeah, I think you get the point I am making here. She has been through some shit, okay? So, of course I am elated when the story throws her a bone and she finally gets a happy moment. What's not to love, right? And can I just mention how incredible the voice acting is in this segment? A sentiment I've heard from some people is that Dawntrail is better played in JP voices, and I won't comment on the differences between them. All I will say is that the English VA for Krile is absolutely terrific. The awkwardness and hesitation when she first meets her parents.
Oh, what can I say?
The genuine holding back of tears.
It has been 20 years.
The happiness when she receives her name.
My name is Maya.
The elation when she calls them mother and father.
Farewell, father.
Even the little struggle her voice conveys as she shuts down the terminal.
I do.
I mean, wow, it's phenomenal. I honestly think Gemma Lawrence might be one of the most underrated VAs in this game, and I mean that sincerely, not in a they're underrated kind of way. I feel like as she has played this character for almost a decade now, she has cultivated Krile to become so awesome. I really noticed this in Shadowbringers and Endwalker, but I think Dawntrail adds an additional dimension now that she's a Pictomancer and has combat lines too. There are so many different ways she conveys the character perfectly, whether it be the kind, warm and loving voice.
We have a shared goal, and, if at all possible, I'd rather we enjoy the journey.
The mentoring kind of voice.
Your passions will be your greatest strength of all. Remember that.
The afraid voice that she taps into from time to time.
It was a trifle terrifying, to be frank.
The sassy, playful tone.
Not that there's any shame in it, but you were sleeping like babies. I'm told that sleeping in proper beds of your own choosing is a much more effective way to prepare for battle.
And of course, she could at any moment shift into someone you absolutely do not want to fuck with.
Galuf Baldessian was never one to forsake his fellow man. Even if this nation closed every door and retreated from the world, he would have found a way to help the Scions, help every soul of this star fight back against the coming doom.
I also like that Krile sounds a lot older than her age would suggest. This actually makes sense as some people do mature a lot faster and basically become older more rapidly when they go through traumatic experiences. So in that regard, I actually think it makes sense that the VA also portrays her as a bit of an older woman in that sense. Furthermore, I like the symbolism behind the ice cream scene. We know that the people in living memory are essentially replicas of real people. They are essentially just lines of code made of memories. Granted, the memories of which they are made of are real, so it is manufactured, but they are still living after a fashion and seem to have free will and everything. But Krile is an actual living, breathing person visiting the place. So if she were to try and, say, taste the food, her taste receptors wouldn't react at all, meaning the food wouldn't taste of anything, since it's basically lines of code. Her father, of course, realizes this and is a bit taken aback when Krile is seemingly enjoying the ice cream, to which Krile herself responds by saying she enjoys it. So what's happening there? Can she taste it? Can she not taste it? Is she just faking it for the sake of keeping up the appearance? It could be, of course, any number of those things, but my takeaway was that the emotion she felt in that moment, the warmth of her parents, the joy of finally getting to meet them, those integral human emotions are what made that moment real for her. In a sense, the fake ice cream makes for a good metaphor for the relationship between Krile and her parents in this moment. It's artificial, it's manufactured, it's fake to a degree, yes, that is all true, but the emotion she's feeling, the experience she's forging, the memory she's creating, those are completely genuine. So yeah, I like what they did there with the ice cream and what it represents in their relationship. Using ice cream as a narrative tool to bond three characters together. Hold on, did Tetsuya Nomura write this? I also want to add one more thing because it came up in a conversation with a friend of mine and I thought it would make for a good inclusion to the video. It was basically concerning Krile's positive reception towards her parents and how she doesn't at all press the issue of her parents abandoning her. In theory, it makes sense for someone to question it, and there are many ways in which one might react in such a situation. They might ask about it, they might keep silent, they might lash out. What also complicates this is that in Krile's instance, there was no time to kind of deliberate and thoroughly think of her approach. Well, sort of. In the very first zone, there is optional dialogue where she ponders if her parents are somewhere in that place, so maybe she had some brief time to consider that eventuality, but I'd say for the most part it came as a surprise to her, and naturally, if things come to us out of the left field, we tend to react way more emotionally and irrationally. Another element here is the whole getting to only spend brief moments before they fade away. With those two things put into the equation, would I act more irrationally or impulsively in this instance? From that angle, you might think her reaction is perhaps not proper, as most of us would probably lash out if it was that sudden, but then I guess I am not quite as composed as Krile, so there's that. Pleasantly surprising, however, is that the writers seem to actually have thought about this and even take that as an opportunity to allow us to gain some insight into how she views her parents in those scenes. There is one line in particular that shows why she is so easily able to forgive her biological parents.
Do not torment yourselves so. As fate would have it, you entrusted me to a good man. His name is Galuf, and he raised me as his own. What's more, I've been blessed with the finest comrades anyone could have. It's thanks to you that I am here now, hale and happy.
I think this line more than anything provides the best insight into her brain and how she perceives her parents. It's basically, well, you may have abandoned me, but at least you left me in the care of the best possible person. They even foreshadow this earlier in the story, giving this a great payoff here.
I quite understand. I have no memories of my birth parents either. For a while, I wanted to learn who they were. But over time, that curiosity waned. Galuf was my dear grandfather, and he was all I needed.
It seems as though in her mind, this act of giving her to a compassionate person that did raise her properly makes up for it, or at least somewhat makes up for it, enough to the point that she doesn't want to press the issue in the short time she had with them. Though it is kind of funny, it was all happenstance. Can you imagine if instead of the three people that Krile's parents met when they traveled through the gate, What if instead it was an evil bastard hell-bent on world domination who forcibly takes the child, stabs the mother to death in cold blood, and then proceeds to enslave the child and use her to his own power-hungry ends? So, you know, I guess I'm glad we weren't playing a game where something like that happens, right? Now, in addition, there was of course this angle as well.
You were born with an unusual gift, you see. Upon learning of it, preservation sought to subject you to experiments.
The way they frame it to her is basically we did it to protect you, but that is a pretty tired old trope, so I won't focus too much on that. I also think this segment is such a sleek FF5 reference. In hindsight, I feel like a fool for not thinking this was such an obvious angle to go with Krile's character. Of course, in FF5, she is someone who comes from another world. By the way, if you're wondering how I'm saying this so brazenly, it's not really a FF5 spoiler, it's made obvious literally from the moment you meet her, which goes to show how relevant part of the character that whole thing is. She's basically this kind of an alien and mysterious person. Very fitting to further incorporate that into FF14. And of course the name Maya being a reference to her full name from FF5, Krile Maya Baldessian. Smooth. I also wanted to add a comment I received on my original Krile video, where they ponder on whether Krile will keep her adopted name or embrace her given name, or if she'll stick to using both as she has done so far. It could certainly make for an interesting angle for her character, to see what kind of an image she will form of her adopted parent Galuf and her biological parents, and how she will juggle those two. Especially because Japan has quite a different mentality regarding adoption to the West, although F14 does of course take on a lot of Western influence due to the nature of the localization and how it's handled. Anyway, in short, you'll basically hear no complaints from me regarding this section. It was brilliantly made and I give props to the developers there.
Farewell.
Oh man. Oh man. Wow. I'm gonna need a moment after that. Oh, oof. I don't have any words beyond that. It was just amazing. That's it.
Suffice it to say, social graces were not among his list of talents. Striding up to his seniors on his first day, head held high. What was it he said again?
Alright, so now we have covered the 3 points I brought up earlier. Krile becoming a Pictomancer, Krile's personal quest, and the emotional payoff with her parents. I've certainly tossed a little bit of critique along the way, but mostly I have been gushing thus far. So where does the sentiment that Krile is sidelined in this expansion come from, and what are my thoughts on that? Now, I think Krile's story in Dawntrail is structurally sound. We have the whole point of her taking on Pictomancy and taking on a combat role. We have the hook, which is her finding her way to the Golden City and along the way, finding more about her backstory. And we have a satisfying resolution when she enters living memory and gets a few moments with her biological parents. The bones for a good story are right there, in my opinion. However, it was missing a crucial element.
Where's the flavor? Where's the flavor in this? I don't taste anything.
To use a food analogy here, yes, I know, very original, shut up. Was I content with Krile's story in 7.0? Yes, I was. But I was content in the way that one would be if they were to eat plain oatmeal for breakfast. I mean literally just oatmeal, nothing else. Yes, it's edible, but surely even just sprinkling in a little bit of cinnamon will elevate the experience to a whole new level, not to mention a slew of other things I add to it because I eat oatmeal more or less every morning, and yes, that's a flex of my healthy lifestyle. That is pretty much Krile in Dawntrail. It's got the basic structure for a satisfying story, but her character throughout is just way too plain and bare bones. To demonstrate what I mean, there's actually a really nice scene right after the level 91 dungeon where Krile and Wuk-Lamat have a discussion about how they were both adopted and have not met their biological parents. It's a wholesome moment where they can sympathize with one another. Krile then takes on a bit of a big sister role towards Wuk-Lamat, reminding her of the importance of authenticity. Wuk-Lamat returns the warmth by promising her she'll find the Golden City, not just for the sake of completing the rite, but for Krile's sake as well. Krile then takes on a bit of a humble stance and kinda deflects this, as she doesn't want to put on an extra burden on anyone and rather her friends simply enjoy the journey without any added pressure. It's a pretty simple exchange, but I rather enjoyed it. It, alongside the satisfying resolution, demonstrates that they were clearly capable of writing great scenes for Krile. It's just that they perhaps did not know where to slot those in throughout the story, and the result is that we simply do not get many such instances where Krile's personality shines through. And this is exactly what leads to the commonly felt sentiment that she was sidelined or benched for most of the expansion. Alternatively, the TLDR version is that she simply did not get enough screen time. But I like to make my content long and elaborate, makes me feel special, you know.
Come on, give me something. Try not to enjoy yourselves too much, or you're liable to attract attention.
Of course, you would be the one to remind me. So, there were definitely some missteps with Krile's portrayal in 7.0, that much should be clear to most people by this point. But I don't want to just sit here and dunk on the writers and proceed to bitch and moan about how it's the worst storytelling the games have ever seen and blah 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 blah. I would prefer instead to engage in meaningful conversation and provide feedback to the writers that has more substance than pacing problem or wow, Wuk-Lamat's so bad. I mean, I know my audience is more mature than that, but the amount of poor quality discourse I saw surrounding this game is astounding. I emphasize this because, in a way, I actually give props to Square Enix for having the guts to have less experienced writers take to the stage and show what they are capable of. And one way to see them succeed, or really the only thing we can do as a community, is voice our opinions and provide the feedback they need to shape their future stories into ones we can enjoy more. That's it. And I am doing this with full acknowledgement that most, if not all, of the 7-point act story is already completed. It's still important, I think. Anyway, let me go down the list of things I want to see regarding Krile. This list mainly addresses what I want to see from the 7-point act quests, but you could also apply some of these to basically be what could have been there in 7.0. So you can read these either in past or future tense. Also, this is not an order of priority. I just wrote these as they came to mind. I mentioned this earlier, but there should be a solo instance featuring Krile. Ever since they added these RP solo duties in 4.4, I felt they had a lot of potential. Being able to actually play as that character, to get to know their thoughts and feel as they struggle, I think it's a huge part of bonding with them. There exists a very tiny group of people who always moan about these duties, citing they don't like their hotbars and abilities being replaced with simpler buttons, but I'd wager the vast majority of people enjoy them, and once again, as a narrative tool, it adds a lot to the story in my opinion. Wuk-Lamat had a solo instance, so I don't understand why the other prominent character capable of fighting did not. It's also perplexing because usually they've taken the opportunity to have us play as one or both of the new jobs of an expansion, kind of get a little taste of them through these RP duties. Gunbreaker as Tancred in 5.0, Sage as Alphino in 6.0, or if we count post-MSQ patches, Samurai as Hien in 4.5 and Reaper as Zero in 6.3. Just seems like a missed opportunity to have us play as Pictomancer as Cryon. So when it comes to talking about patches, I definitely want to see a solo instance where we play as Cryon. It needs to happen. It seems like such a no-brainer given a big part of her character in this very expansion is about mastering up the courage to fight alongside her friends. Getting to actually play as her and feel her struggle from her POV would add a great deal to her character and would definitely demonstrate her conviction in a way we simply do not see when we play as the Warrior of Light and, you know, kinda overpower everything. In the 7.0 MSQ, I was really hoping Krile would have had a similar segment as we had with Erenville in Shallow Annie. Basically, this little mini adventure featuring just the Warrior of Light and Cryon. Definitely a missed opportunity there. I think if we had a patch that heavily focuses on just Cryo, I think that could make up for it though. It may sound like a lot, dedicating a whole patch to just or mostly her, but given that she's one of the more prominent characters in the MSQ, I would say she deserves it. You can still have and should have other characters in the background, but make the focus of this one patch be on Cryo. Basically, like the adventure we had with her in Eureka, but voice acted and with more opportunities due to her being a fighter now. Not to mention without all the grinding. Oh god, the grind. And Pagos. Ugh, that place really was traumatizing for both us and Cryo. There's this certain side to Cryo that we have not seen come out for a while, at least not properly. Cryo strikes me as this kind of a person who has this outwardly appearance of a kind, warm woman, the big sister vibes I bring up in my analysis basically. But it's deceptive because she isn't a doormat either, as she also has this, I'ma call it the psycho Cryo side of her, that she busts out on a whim to tease someone, pry into their past to get what she wants, or when you have crossed her level of patience. I think this is what made many of us fall in love with her character in the first place. Recall her introduction to us in Heavensward. Remember that evil smile she made as she was about to unleash some dirt she had on Alphino? That's Cryo, and I love it. Or when she blackmails Istinian to go after Black Rose. Heck, even the Warrior of Light isn't safe, as she gives them a proper dressing down in Stormblood for just standing there instead of helping. To me, that is Cryo. Yeah, she's a very kind and passionate person, but at any moment she can completely fuck someone up if she deems it necessary, and that's the side I want to see come out from time to time. Now, it would be kind of unfair to have her bully Alphino again. After all, he's went through his character arc and isn't the little shit he used to be in the past. Now, we need other targets she can focus her wrath on, and I think Dawntrail has quite a few of those, but the two prime candidates to me are Erenville and Bakul. I could totally picture a scenario in which, similar to the whole Estinian situation, Krile discovers some embarrassing memory of Erenville, maybe something to do with his mother. But this time she's not faking it, she legit has an echo flashback that reveals this. There could then be this fun little tension in the air. Is she gonna reveal it? Will she keep it to herself? All the while Erenville is sweating bricks over it. I think it would be hilarious given how Erenville has this tough guy act going on, how even the mere mention of his birth name gives him embarrassment. I think it would really endear us to both characters in the process, just some fun little shenanigans like that. Bakul Jaja makes a lot of sense as well, I feel. I can definitely picture Krile performing some masterclass troll act on this guy. I think what makes it extra funny is that Bakul is this giant while Krile is this tiny woman, a very classic case to not judge a book by its cover. We need to see more of Galuf. This is kind of self-explanatory. Show us more Galuf, which leads to more appreciation to Krile and why she looks up to him beyond "he's my grandfather." This is actually quite likely because Galuf was even voice acted in 7.0, but only for one scene where he only had a few lines. It seems a bit redundant to give him voice acting solely for that, so I strongly suspect we'll be seeing more of him in the patches following 7.0. Bonus points if we also get something concerning his relationship with Matoya and or Louisoix. I've always been intrigued by the sort of rivalry between those three old-timers. It would also tie in quite nicely with that scene where Krile meets Matoya for the first time, and she briefly talks about Galuf. Some sort of a tie-in with the Eureka story, or at the very least optional dialogue acknowledging it. The Eureka story was great for fleshing out Krile's character and should absolutely get a mention somewhere. 6. Krile is a rather unique character, and I don't even refer to her personality or anything like that. I mean that her character possesses some rather mystical features which tracks with her FF5 counterpart. I would like to see some of these explored more in the future. For instance, we have her unique echo ability. They use this in some extremely small amounts in 7.0 MSQ, but not much really. She basically just senses how evil Zoralja is. Some trust dialogue in dungeons, but that's about it. I speculate her echo ability a lot at the end of my Krile analysis, so I recommend checking out that video to see more. Besides her unique echo ability, there is the fact that she's the only other character besides Emmet and Vena who were able to pull off the miraculous feat of pulling someone from the ethereal sea, and she has done that twice now. So that's something we can make use of as well. And this is me spitballing ideas, but I had a thought occur to me and I would like to share it here because I think it would be a neat thing to explore. Remember in Elpis when Vena instructed us on how to tap into the echo flashbacks in a more focused and concentrated manner? I found it odd that they introduced us to this idea only to then still have all the subsequent echo flashbacks appear completely uncontrollably, just like before. One neat way to make use of all of this is to have a sort of a training session featuring Krile and the Warrior of Light. Maybe together they'd be able to train their echo abilities and try this way of tapping into ambient ether and memories to more controllably peer into someone's past. Krile would be a fitting character for this precisely because a huge part of her character is, well, her uniqueness with the echo and her sensitivity to it. It would also tie in with the whole Heidelin possessing her in Endwalker, sort of bring all of that back with her training together with the Warrior of Light to grasp a technique that Vena told the Warrior of Light about. Just an idea that came to mind that I wanted to share. And not to mention, the fact that she comes from another world and the things that could be done with that as well. So that's some of the things I would like to see with Krile. Note that the list isn't absolute where they must tick all those boxes or the character is ruined. I more just wanted to provide some ideas of my own to start discussions for one, but if by any chance these reach the ears of the developers, as a few things I'd like to see in the future. What makes me cautiously optimistic that they can still pull off a solid story with Krile is that there is actually a pretty great setup with the unresolved stuff that she could be heavily involved in. I have a feeling that the Preservation will be the chief antagonists in the following patches, and we'll have to deal with them in some way. Krile obviously has a very personal stake in all of that, given what those people did to her parents, not to mention her hailing from that world, and I have faith in them being able to deliver a satisfying story with all that. I came across this interview where lead localization Kate Quina notes how the process of writing and recording for Krile has been somewhat of a learning experience. She even admits not really being sure what Krile wants prior to the experience, but as she developed Dawntrail, she came to understand her character better. I could definitely see this applying to the dev team at large and applies to players as well. Now that she is more at the forefront, we are starting to see Krile more in depth, her inner workings, what she wants, and so on. So maybe that can convince you that they can do her story justice, or maybe not. It's up to you. Well, that's all I got for you this time. I was considering dropping the full remake of a Krile analysis right now, but since it's apparent that there is more story to go still, I decided to release this little video here in the meantime, so as to not leave you guys hanging. Honestly, I was really happy to see people ask for a Krile video. It makes me smile seeing the appreciation for her character, so thank you. And thanks for listening to my thoughts. I'll try to return to the YouTube grind, so if you want to see more Dawntrail content and that eventual Krile analysis, I recommend subbing the channel. Have a nice day.